We're on.
Excellent. Okay. Cool. Well, good morning, and very nice to see everyone. It's a shame I can't see you, Susanna, but nice to meet you. And yeah, today AULA invited me to talk about natural wine, and I really jumped at the chance because I do really enjoy talking about natural wine. I enjoy drinking it, but I enjoy talking about it just as much, because it's a subject that's kind of on people's minds, I think, on people's lips, but it's not really that well explained a lot of the time. A lot of people don't really know what natural wine is. And today I'm going to try and clear up a few of those doubts, show you what I think natural wine is, show you what it isn't, show you where to find it, how to drink it. So yeah, and my name's Dominic, by the way. I don't remember if I said that, but I'm from Juicy Selections. We are a natural wine subscription. It's a monthly subscription. We have 2 bottles or 4 bottles per month, which we ship to the whole of Brazil. And we also have an online bottle shop where you can buy individual bottles if you like. And I'm just gonna quickly plug, my website. I'm just gonna show you kind of what we work with, show you a few of the bottles. So I'm gonna share my screen. Just a second. Here we go.
Excuse me, Dominic, I don't know if it's just me, but I listen to you a little low. If you can please raise up your volume, I think it's the best for the recording. Okay?
Cool. Okay. I'll figure out how to do that in just a second. I'm going to speak a little more loudly and a little more clearly.
Okay.
And so here's the website, and here are the subscriptions, and here are a few bottles of natural wine. So as you can see, there are a lot of bottles that don't really look like wine sometimes, that have a different color, they have a different packaging, and the labels are often quite interesting in natural wine. So we work with a lot of Brazilian producers, but we also do a few imports ourselves. Just gonna stop the, okay, got it. Right, cool, yeah. So that's our website. So yeah, I don't know whether Susanna said that she'd been to Winehouse possibly, which is one of our bars in Rio. You may not have been to Crew, we were open from 2018 to 2020, our natural wine bar, and then we closed due to the pandemic, unfortunately. So maybe you didn't get to go there, but I don't know whether you've ever come across natural wine before. Have you ever heard of natural wine? Have you ever drunk natural wine? Just give me a
no,
yes.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't remember to drink natural wine. I don't know what is it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's great, because that's kind of why I'm here. I'm going to explain a little bit about what natural wine is and what it isn't. I think Mariana sent a couple of links to have a look at beforehand, but I'm going to go through them anyway. There's a couple of videos and a text, and also there's another text that I didn't send previously, but I'm going to have a look at with you guys. And yeah, and I'll play the video and we'll go through and talk a little bit about what we understood. Okay, great. So the first video is it's quite specific because it's about Georgian wine. It's not just about natural wine. But I found it was very helpful because it's a short video, but they kind of, all of the main points are there about what natural wine is. And afterwards, I'll speak about why it's kind of important that it is Georgian wine, and how Georgian wine is important to the natural wine movement. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. I'm just going to play the beginning of the video for you. Okay. Okay.
Welcome back. Many people think that all wine is natural. However, that's not the case. This morning we are joined by Christine Doyson from the Georgia Ministry of Agriculture's Wine Agency to talk about what natural wine is, why it's becoming so trendy. Thank you so much for being here, Christine.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So what is the difference between natural wine and the regular wine that we just pick up at the store?
Most people would think that all wine is natural.
Well, it comes from grapes.
It comes from grapes. But the truth is that more than 300 additives and ingredients can be added to wine. That does not have to be declared on the label. There can be artificial colors, there can be artificial flavors, there can be extra sugar. All kinds of things can go into wine.
And that can lead to a more serious hangover, from what I understand, too.
That's the conventional wisdom, and that I have to say is actually my experience. But it's almost like people choose to eat organic food because they want to know what goes into their body. So now many people are choosing to drink natural wine because they want something that's made without herbicides, without pesticides, and without any additives.
Now, does the natural wine cost more than...
Okay, I'm just going to stop there. So that first minute, I think there is a very important point in that first minute, and that is the point about a lot of people think wine is natural. A lot of people think they go to any shop, they go to the supermarket, they buy a bottle of wine, and they think it's just fermented grape juice. They think it's healthy. They have this romantic idea of a lush vineyard and people lying out on a rug and eating grapes from the vines, and then foot stomping and a barrel of wine. This sort of very quaint idea of winemaking, which today just isn't realistic for conventional wine, because wine is just a product like any other product, which with industrialization, with technology, and with market pressure ends up being molded, being manipulated, being polished to suit the tastes of the market that it's selling to. So unbelievably, I mean, I'm going to show you in a second a list of additives that are allowed in winemaking, and it is quite shocking for your average wine drinker that doesn't really know this, because yeah, you can all types of things, even animal what do you say, things that have come from animals like egg whites, so non-vegan products are used in conventional winemaking. And yeah, and people these days, they do usually, a lot of people are aware of or conscious about their food consumption. So people will choose to eat organically, they'll choose to buy local food, but when it comes to wine to accompany their organic local food, a lot of the time they'll just get a cheap bottle of something, some Chilean red or something. So it kind of baffles me that people are willing to even spend, you know, that extra money on organic food, on more natural food, but not necessarily wine. So I'm just going to show you a list of, this is more specific to the United States, but it applies, it's pretty much the same as here in Brazil. In Europe, there are a little bit less additives that you can use in winemaking, but in Brazil, it's pretty similar. I'm just going to check, how's my audio now? Would you like me to try and have a tweak?
For me, it's good.
Okay. Because I don't know whether you know, I think I'm on the max. So I'm just going to carry on trying to speak clearly and loudly.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to jump back to the desktop. I'm going to show you this list of additives, wine additives. This is from Wine Folly, which is, I don't know whether you've ever heard of Wine Folly. It's a pretty good, pretty comprehensive website. They have a newsletter, I think, and they talk about wine in general. They don't just talk about natural wine, but I found this presentation to be very useful as to what can go and commonly goes. So these are commonly used additives in winemaking. I'm not going to go into too much detail with like the vocabulary, but we're just kind of going to go across the main points, the main words here, because a lot of it is like lab vocabulary, scientific vocabulary. But just so you can see, antiseptic, antioxidants. So something that's very commonly talked about in wine now is sulfites. A lot of people think they're allergic to sulfites. They think they have headaches after drinking wine because of the sulfites. That's probably not true for most cases, because in fact, I would say most headaches after drinking lots of wine are because you drank lots of wine and you didn't necessarily drink lots of water and you're dehydrated, or it could be other things in the wine as well if you're drinking conventional wine. It's not necessarily the sulfites, but very high quantities of sulfites are allowed in conventional winemaking, which, you know, it can lead to headaches. And if you are allergic to sulfites, this can be a problem. But also, if you are allergic to sulfites, then you probably need to steer away from a lot of tinned food, dried fruits, and stuff that also has sulfites in them. But so the antioxidants, they're not necessarily a bad thing, but in a very high quantity, they can be. And in conventional winemaking, there are a lot of sulfites used, not just in bottling. They use it on the grapes before fermentation. They use it during fermentation to stop fermentation. So yeah, heavily used. Filtration, something natural wine generally isn't filtered. It can be roughly filtered. You can decant as well, which just means you let the wine settle and then you take all of the liquid off the top and leave the sediment at the bottom. That's reasonably common, but filtration and definitely clarification does not occur in natural winemaking. And especially clarification, we see just under filtration, you can see that egg whites are used, plant proteins. There are loads of lab extracted materials that I have no idea how they're obtained, to be honest. And I don't really want them in my wine, but they're used to make the wine sparkly clean, very transparent. It's purely superficial, and it's very commonplace in conventional winemaking. And here is something very important: yeast, fermentation nutrients. In conventional winemaking, you add yeasts generally because you don't want to risk having a natural fermentation and not having your specific desired result. So you generally add yeasts to obtain a specific result. Like grapes have specific yeasts that you should use with them to obtain, like Chardonnay. There'll be some strain of yeast that you should ferment Chardonnay with to get a buttery, pineapple-y Chardonnay in the finish. This happens all the time. There are like huge catalogs of yeasts that winemakers can use to obtain a certain result. And in my opinion, you can't even begin to talk about terroir if you add yeasts and you don't let nature ferment the grapes. Grapes have a lot of yeasts on their skins. There are yeasts even in the pulp. There are yeasts even in the winery. There are yeasts all over the place, and they do ferment on their own. They don't need help necessarily. Then, I mean, stabilization. People add, organoleptic management. That just means controlling the flavor of the wine. So people add acid or take away acid. They add oak. Sometimes wine will age in oak, which is kind of normal. That's historical. It's fine. But people often use oak chips as well now. So they'll throw oak chips in the barrel to give themselves an oaky flavor, rather than barrel aging. It's quicker, it's cheaper, it's easier. So, and then we have corrective things. So you can add sugar, you can take away sugar, you can do reverse osmosis, which is I have no idea how that's done, but it's a very sort of high-tech process. You can add water if the wine's too strong. You can add copper sulfate. You can add, I mean, even in Brazil, you can even add flavorings and colorings to your wine. So you can add acidification, deacidification. So yeah, I'm just going to stop showing that. It's a lot of information to take in, but it's just to give you an idea of just how much can go into wine. So you're not necessarily just drinking grape juice. And that's why I like to keep it really simple when I'm talking about natural wine and say natural wine is just fermented grape juice. And people say, well, I thought that was the case with all wine. And then we kind of like explain how it's not the case necessarily. And in Europe, there are, as I said, it's a little bit stricter with conventional wine. There aren't loads, there aren't as many as in the States, aren't as many additives that you can use. But in Brazil, there's more, I think, even than in the United States. So yes, so we'll carry on watching the video. Does anyone have any questions up until this point? I mean,
not yet.
I would like to ask you just one thing that I do not understand. Organic wines is not the same as natural wines. They are different.
Perfect. Yes. That's something I'll probably touch on it again later on, but I will. It's a good time for us to cover this now as well, because almost everyone that doesn't drink natural wine and has never sort of been introduced to natural wine, if I say, have you ever had natural wine? Almost everyone says, I've had an organic wine, and then they don't know whether that means they've had a natural wine or not. So I guess that's your case, and that's why you're asking.
Yes, yes, it's
organic. Yeah, organic grapes. Organic grapes, yes, will be certified in an organic wine. So if you see a label which has the organic seal of approval, Orgânico do Brasil here, if you see that stamp on a wine, it means the grapes are organic. It does not mean that the winemaking is very natural. There are still lots of things you can add, including yeasts. You can add yeasts in organic winemaking and still have an organic wine. There are obviously less things you can use in the winemaking process. You have to use, I mean, things have to be of an organic composition. But yeasts, I mean, yeasts are inherently organic, but they've been manipulated or whatever. So yes, so organic means organic grapes. It does not mean natural winemaking. So you can still add quite a lot of sulfites in the bottle if you want. I mean, there's not it's slightly less again than conventional wine, but it's still a lot. So when I see a bottle with the organic seal on it, it doesn't speak to me that much. And a lot of natural winemakers actually don't have the organic seal because they are very small production. They don't really have the investment to get the organic approval, because it is a bit of an investment to get that little badge, that little sticker. So yeah, it's halfway. I would say it's halfway to getting there to natural wine. Natural wine ideally is organic or biodynamic grapes, but they're not necessarily certified a lot of the time. And it is natural fermentation, so spontaneous fermentation, and little or no sulfites in the bottle. So in those second and third points, I would say a lot of organic wine would fall short of being natural. I hope that responds to your point. And yeah, and we're gonna carry on watching that video about Georgian wines, and I'll stop it again after a minute or so, because there's another very important point. Yeah, that's the one.
Hello.
Oh, sorry.
My name is...
Wrong video.
Are you regular?
A little bit. I would say natural wine starts around 15.
Yes. Now, does the natural wine cost more than your regular?
A little bit. I would say natural wine starts around $15 a bottle, whereas, you know, conventional wine, you can find it for $5 to $10 a bottle. So just similar, again, to organic food, it's a little bit more expensive. So people have to make the decision if that's, you know, what they want to do.
But oftentimes you get what you pay for, right?
Oftentimes you do get what you pay for. And I know a lot of people, of course, spend $15 and much more for a regular bottle of wine. So I don't think that natural wine is expensive, but it is more than $5 a bottle.
What did you bring with you today?
I brought 3.
Okay. So a quick point there about the price of natural wine, because again, some people will say, okay, well, I can get a bottle of organic wine, for example, for pretty cheap. There are a lot of organic wines out there, mass produced, which are as cheap as a lot of conventional wines. But yeah, the thing is, if you compare conventional food and organic food, a lot of the time, just something very simple like a head of lettuce, for example, it's often twice the price of an organic head of lettuce will be twice the price as of the its conventional counterpart. Even if you're talking about chocolate, something more expensive a lot of the time. Again, you could pay 20 reals for a bar of conventional chocolate, 40 for an organic or biodynamic bar of chocolate. And a lot of people are willing to pay that. But with wine, because again, we're taking a bit more of a jump because, you know, conventional wine, a decent-ish bottle of conventional wine, you would be spending at least about 50 reals. When you talk about double that, when you get to above kind of 100 reals a bottle, people often balk at the price and they say, oh God, no, I'm not used to spending that on a bottle of wine. But again, you kind of get what you pay for. You are, if you're spending 50 reals or less on a bottle of wine, especially if it's been imported, that's incredibly cheap at its origin. And so it's gonna be mass produced. There's no way you can get wine that cheap in a supermarket in Brazil that's come all the way across the world unless it's mass produced. And so we're talking, again, natural wine, we're talking organic viticulture or biodynamic. So they're very sort of labor intensive processes. Hand picking as well. So there are natural producers that use mechanical harvesting, but it's very controversial. So generally people say that the grapes would have to be hand-picked for it to be a natural wine. And again, labor intensive, it's going to cost more, it's going to take longer. And all through the whole process, if you're making 1,000 bottles of wine instead of 10,000, 100,000, 1 million bottles of wine, each individual bottle is going to be more expensive to produce. All of your packaging, all of your products, everything is going to be more expensive because you're doing everything on a smaller scale. So, and when people ask me about prices between individual bottles that we sell, they're like, oh, why is this one cheaper and why is this one expensive? Generally in natural wine, it's production. Like if you produce 300 bottles of wine and you need to make money off it, it's going to be an expensive wine. And if you produce 10,000, you can still be a natural producer. If you have a large estate, big traditional winery, but you make natural wine, your wine's probably going to be cheaper because it's larger production. So I often say here in Brazil, for example, nobody wants to drink table grapes. But if you want a natural wine and an affordable wine here in Brazil, you should drink table grapes or maybe Moscato. But Isabel, Niagara, these grapes that people often have a granddad who makes wine, especially here in the South. They often have a granddad who makes wine and they say, oh no, but it's Isabel, it's horrible. But that's natural wine. And if you want a natural Cabernet or a natural Merlot or a natural Pinot Noir, it's probably going to set you back double what you might pay for a conventional wine. So I think it's a very important point because it's often a stop gap. It's the place that people stop when they start investigating natural wine. They realize it's more expensive and they say, maybe it's not for me. But you know, you get what you pay for. It's a decision. It's a conscious decision to consume something that's a little bit more ethical, perhaps. And also, I just think they're much more interesting wines. And so yeah, and then I'm just going to play the video again to take us to the end, and then we'll discuss a little bit more. Okay, I'm sharing my screen.
3 different wines from Georgia, a red, a rosé, and a white. And it was actually interesting, you know, being in New Haven, I had to go out for pizza last night.
Of course.
And these wines.
That's what I can eat. I cannot drink the wine, but I can definitely eat pizza right now.
We went to a great place on Howe Street. It was called Brick Oven, and they actually used wood. And I said, well, that's so natural. And they didn't have wine there, but this wine would actually be delicious with their pizza.
And this is the rosé?
This is the rosé wine. So these wines are from Georgia, the country, not the state. So it's located on the Black Sea.
Sometimes you do have to preface that.
We do all the time.
I believe
actually, and sometimes, in fact, I didn't know where Georgia was the first time. It's like on the same latitude as Rome and the same longitude as Moscow, almost. So it's way over.
Okay, so but it has the same climate as Italian wines.
So interesting because they have subtropical with palm trees, and then they have high mountains, the Caucasus Mountains. There's a broad range of what we've called terroirs, you know, different climates, microclimates. Most of the wine that we get in America is from a valley, say like Napa Valley, but theirs is called the Cajeti Valley.
Interesting. And they make all different types of whites, reds, rosés.
They have more than 525 different wine grapes that grow in Georgia.
Wow, incredible.
I know, it's called the cradle of wine. It's the earliest winemaking civilization by archaeological evidence. It goes back 8,000 years. And in fact, the special way they make wine is UNESCO protected. They do it often in huge qvevri, these giant clay pots that are buried in the ground. So it's very natural. They tread the grapes, some of them. The juice flows right into the qvevri. They seal it up and let nature take its course.
Fascinating, fascinating. Well, if people want to learn more about these wines, how can they do that?
We have a great website. It's just called winesgeorgia.com. There's lots of information. They're very fun to taste. Should I pour one just so people can see the color?
Pour one so people can take a look at the color of the wine. That looks like you're pouring the rosé there. Maybe Kevin can try it a little bit later. Christine Doyson, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
For more information about Christine and her wines, just head to our website, WTH.com. Click on the On Air tab and pull it down to the morning.
Okay, cool. Sorry, my WhatsApp beeps. During that video, I just closed the window. So yes, getting to the end, possibly the most important reason I chose this video to talk about natural wine is that the wines are from Georgia. And not many people have ever had Georgian wine. It hasn't been something very commercial on the international market for a very long time. But when you're talking about natural wine, Georgian wine is very important because, as she mentioned in the video, it's possibly the birthplace of wine. It's the oldest winemaking civilization on archaeological evidence, as she said in the video. Some people say it started in China, as almost everything was invented in China before anywhere else, to be honest. But on archaeological evidence, the first winemaking civilization is there in Georgia, and they make wine in the same way that they have always made wine. So that's a very important point. When people think about natural wine as this trendy new thing, this crazy way to make wine, I like to bring things a bit down to earth and say, look, it's just the way wine was always made before industrialization, before market pressure. And they've never stopped doing it. And now Georgian wine in the natural wine scene is very sought after. A lot of people, you get American natural wine freaks going over to Georgia to spend months to travel around all of the wineries. It's really boomed. And it's because of that. It's because they have never compromised. When everybody else in the world was buying up loads of technology and lab yeasts and stuff to polish their wine. Most of Georgia, at least, stuck to the same. And she mentioned these kvevri. It's a difficult word to pronounce. Still don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. They're huge clay pots, amphora, and they bury them in the ground. So when you look down, it's just like a hole. It just looks like a hole, but there's a huge clay pot down there, and they throw the grapes in there and let that ferment, and then they kind of just siphon off the liquid. So it's the most natural way you could really drink wine. And so the white wines there are usually made with the skins. So they are orange wines. This isn't from Georgia. We have a shipment coming from Georgia, actually, probably next month. It's going to be in the subscriptions for July, I think. But we also we have other orange wines. So if you look at this bottle, you can see it is actually orange. And when people ask about orange wine, they sometimes think it's made of oranges. They sometimes think, because of the name orange, they think that the color is the most important thing. But despite this bottle is very orange, it looks almost like Iron Brew, which is an English soft drink. But it doesn't have to be literally orange. It's just a skin macerated white. We can call it a macerated white. You can call it a skin contact white. And it just means that it was fermented with the skins. It's the same process as red wine. That's why red wine is red, because it spends time on the skins, and that's where the pigment comes from. So if you do that with white grapes, you get a kind of orangey hue most of the time. This is made with Pinot Grigio, so it's actually a slightly pinky grape. So it's almost like a rosé, but officially it's a white wine. So yeah, so you get these types of wines in Georgia are very common. They're very strong wines. They are like no punches pulled. They're just like real, like loads of grapes, a lot of tannins, usually loads of grape flavors, lots of tannins, strong wines. And yeah, and they're natural. So it's a good, it's always, I mean, if you want to plunge head first into natural wine, if you ever find a Georgian wine, and if it's natural, if it's not mass produced wine, it will give you a really good idea of kind of like how wine was made 3,000 years ago or 8,000 years ago. But natural wine on the whole also kind of gives you that. So yeah, we're just talking about wine being made from grapes, nothing else. Am I getting there as to explaining what natural wine is? Do you have kind of more of an understanding up until now?
Yes, it's very good. Thank you.
Cool, good. And I'm going to, there's another video. Luckily it's an English guy, so we have an English accent. But another person talking about natural wine, about what it means to him. And he is a recent natural wine convert, he says. And he kind of talks about the basics of natural wine in general, it's not as specific as this last video. So I'm gonna show you this video, and again, we'll talk about what he's talking about. We'll divide it into points, and I'll stop and explain. So here we go. What is natural wine to this guy?
Christopher Berry, and I am a natural wine convert. Hello and welcome to Absolute Corkers, the wine show nobody asked for, where we talk and taste all things natural. That's right. I have recently gone full force in on natural wine. It's been on my radar for a couple of years now, and after much deliberating and drinking, I've decided that 95% of my wine consumption will be natural wine. Anyway, for those unaware, this is a very abridged breakdown of the difference between natural and non-natural wines. What's common among the majority of the mass-produced wines on our shelves is the presence of chemicals and stabilizers, such as added sulfur dioxide to prevent oxidization, finings added to filter the wine. These are often animal products such as egg whites and gelatin, added acidity, added sugar. Basically, all these things are to provide consistency and shelf life, which makes sense. If you sell millions of bottles a year, you're going to want it to taste the same every single time. Natural wine, on the other hand, takes the less is more approach. So there's little to no sulfates added other than the natural ones found in the fermentation process, and nothing else is added throughout the entire process. And when I say nothing's taken away, it means the wine's not filtered at all, which means it's vegan friendly and most of the time organic, which is fun. Anyway, let's.
Okay, we'll stop in there. So again, he's talking about additives in the beginning of the video. He talks about sulfites, but also other things. And he makes a good point again about the market that I was talking about pandering to people's tastes, and also the importance when you're producing 1 million bottles per year, you want all of those bottles to taste exactly the same, and you want them to travel well if you're exporting. So basically, yeah, the economic pressure of selling all of your wine as well and making a lot of wine, and you need a lot of profit, leads you to want a very, very stable and a very controlled product, okay, a very definite outcome. And yeah, I think that's one of the most important points of the differences between natural wine and conventional wine. Consistency. Conventional wine has to be consistent every year, wherever it's drunk. And I think it's incredible that people talk so much about terroir in wine. And as I've said it before, I don't believe you can talk about terroir if you control your wine that much. If it tastes the same every year and it tastes the same no matter where the bottle is, because that's not allowing for differences in vintage, for climate differences, for yield differences, for even, yeah, some wines taste different depending on where they've been opened or how much they've traveled. And doesn't necessarily mean they've been spoiled. It just means they've evolved and they taste a little bit different. So in conventional wine, you generally don't get that. And in natural wine, we allow for differences in vintage, even some differences between individual bottles. I mean, obviously, you want some consistency. It would be crazy if no two bottles were the same, but it's not the be all and end all. You are not looking, consistency is not your primary objective. And I think that's, yeah, incredibly important. And that's probably why now, that was probably our first motivation for us to drink natural wine. Today, my wife and I, we only drink natural wine, really. I have nothing against people drinking natural wine. I'm not like, oh God, get that conventional wine out of my barbecue. But personally, we prefer to drink natural wine. And I'll tell a story about how kind of what the point was, what the epiphany was. We were in England in 2015. So we'd opened our first wine bar in Rio. We opened our first wine bar in 2014 in Rio, just to get more people drinking wine. We wanted wine drinking to be more of an informal thing in Botafogo, for example, which is a very cool neighborhood, but wine drinking still wasn't really something that was very hip in Rio. You had to go to a smart restaurant, you had to go to a hotel lobby, or somewhere where you had to dress up, or at least put on a pair of shoes or trousers to drink wine. And I wanted people to be able to sit on the pavement with their dog in Havaianas and have a glass of wine. So basically that was our motivation to open a wine bar, just a quick detour. And then we started drinking a lot of wine. We started being introduced to a lot of wine, Brazilian wine, imported wines. I'd always drunk a lot of wine, but it was really intense for the first couple of years of the bar. As you can imagine, I was always drinking, always tasting wine. And so was my wife. My wife was my business partner still in Juicy Selections, and also she's still a partner in our bar back in Rio. So we drank hell of a lot of wine. And in around 2015, we were in Europe, and my wife was drinking, generally I would have a beer in a pub, and my wife would have a glass of wine. And she would always ask for the house white. And I think we were in Cornwall in the southeast of England, southwest. And little pub, I ordered a beer. She asked for a glass of the house white, and it was a Chilean Sauvignon Blanc. And she drank a little bit, and she just went, like, sighed. And I asked her, I said, is everything all right with the wine? And she said, I'm just so bored of the same wine. Like, everywhere we go, we've been to London, we went to Liverpool in the north of England, and at that time in England, every pub was serving Chilean Sauvignon Blanc, and it all tasted exactly the same. And again, that point about consistency. And she just said, it's just, as a consumer, I feel like an idiot. I feel like I'm being treated as an idiot. I'm not being challenged. I'm not having my senses stimulated. I'm just being spoon-fed the same thing all the time. And it's just boring. And she asked me to get her a beer in the end. So they had local beers, which were far more interesting. But that was our epiphany, which said, why are we drinking the same stuff? And often when we would try Brazilian wines, people would introduce Brazilian wines for us to sell at our bar in Rio, because we always have been very focused on Brazilian wines as well. People would bring us their wines to taste and say, look, it tastes so much like a Bordeaux, or it tastes like a Bourgogne. And we were thinking at this point, why do you want it to taste like a Bordeaux? You're not growing and you're not making a wine in Bordeaux. It should taste like a Brazilian red. So that, again, that's where you're talking about the expression, the true expression of terroir, which you cannot talk about if you polish your wine to the point where it has no personality, no sense of place. And yeah, so that got us really worked up, and we were just like, no, we have to try and drink naturally, and we also have to try and spread the word, because in Rio, again, natural wine was kind of reserved to a few very expensive restaurants in Rio.
Dominic, can I ask you a few questions at this point? Yeah. Is that okay?
Please.
Sorry if I'm interrupting you. You can go on if you want to.
No, yeah.
To close your argument. Okay, so as you said in the beginning, my idea of winemaking is that it was a natural process. So when I think of winemaking, I think of grapes aging in a wood barrel and so on. So I never thought that so many additives were used in that process. So I was quite curious about what a natural wine would be. So it was redundant to me that the wine is always natural. So I have a few questions. The first of which is, you said that natural wine is not just fermented grape juice. So would you say that natural wine is safer for, let's say, pregnant women, or for diabetics, or I hope not children, but because it's natural, would you say it's safer as well?
It's not that low in alcohol. But yes, no, definitely. I mean, you're always going to get less manipulating of the wine, less processors, less additives. And of course, the less added, there are a lot of things that go into natural wine, that go into conventional winemaking. I have no idea what they are. And like when people read labels in supermarkets and they see these numbers, you see like the E numbers, and you say, I have no idea what that is. And these days, I can't remember who kind of like started saying this, but it's kind of common thing I've heard people say is, when they don't understand something on a label,
don't buy
the ingredient in the supermarket, don't buy it, which is difficult actually. But I think it's a kind of cool idea. And again, and with wine, if there's something going on, I don't know what reverse osmosis is. to be honest. But it happens in conventional wine when a wine's gone, I think it's when it's too sugary, when it's too heavy, something like that. It's instead of adding water. But yeah, I don't know how they do it, and I don't want, when I'm drinking natural wine, I know exactly what I'm drinking.
Yeah.
It's just grapes, and the winemaker will always he will always disclose if he's used sulfites or not. And as I said, sulfites to me are not, I'm not a Shiite with sulfites because I don't think, I'm not allergic to them. In tiny quantities, I have no problem with them. As I said, they're present in dried fruits, they're present in tinned foods, they're present in other stuff I consume. So if I'm going to drink zero sulfite wine, I should eat zero sulfite food, which is very difficult. But they're much lower sulfites. So I know that I'm consuming a very tiny quantity of sulfites. Some people add literally homeopathic quantities of sulfites. That there's no scientific evidence that it would even preserve the wine, but they do it as people use homeopathy. So yeah, I would definitely say it's a lot more healthy. The thing about hangovers, whether it gives you less hangovers or not, I would say it does, but it's not necessarily the sulfites. It's probably other stuff that's happened to the wine that's been added. And also a point about some people, which is kind of simple and kind of, some people think it's kind of silly, but you usually drink less natural wine as well. So that's why you have less of a hangover. If you're drinking a mass-produced, conventional, boring, if I may say so, wine, you are more likely to drink like 3 bottles of it and not even think about it. You're not going to ponder it. You're not going to go, oh, this is really interesting wine. What's the story of this wine? You're just going to throw it back. And with natural wine, you usually know about the story of the wine, the story of the winemaker. You know that it's lower production, and also, if nothing else, it's more expensive. So you respect that you've spent more money on the wine. It's kind of like craft beer. People will spend more. Usually, you drink less and you drink better if you drink craft beer rather than Brahma, for example.
You brought craft beer. You mentioned that the bottles and the labels of natural wine are more appealing than the ones on regular wine. Is that a strategy to promote selling? Because every time I go to the supermarket, I see those very appealing beer labels. But if I'm not mistaken, Skol, Antarctica, Brahma are still the ones that are the best sellers. So does the label has a real impact on selling, would you say?
Good. I think that's a good point. I would say yes. I think natural wine, it's amazing. The labels, the producers are very, very, they put a lot of effort into the labels, into the packaging. Even if, I mean, an example of putting a lot of effort but being minimalist, there's a natural wine called Dope by Klaus Preisinger. He's an Austrian natural winemaker. And it's a pet nat sparkling wine. It has a crown cap like a beer, and he's literally just got one of those, one of those really old sticker machines that it's like a typewriter. It punches in the letters. He's just written Dope, D-O-P-E, in one of them and stuck it on the front of the wine. So it's very, very, a lot of effort has gone into the thought of that, I think. But yeah, it's very, very cheap. But yeah, you get natural winemakers contracting artists, like not cheap artists necessarily, to design the labels. It's definitely a big thing in natural wine. Now, because you mentioned that still Brahma and Skol are still the best sellers, despite that. And yeah, I would say again, yeah, in wine, if you're a conventional wine drinker, then maybe a conventional wine label is going to look kind of more safe to you. It's going to look like something you'd enjoy more. So maybe it doesn't really work to convince conventional wine drinkers to drink natural wine, but it works for someone looking for a natural wine to identify a natural wine. And again, taking advantage of that, a lot of conventional winemakers now they might have a zero sulfite wine, or they might have an organic wine, but not necessarily natural. But they'll give it a crazy label because then they might fool someone into thinking it's a completely natural wine. And yeah, so I guess that they're kind of calling that they're trying to gain the attention of a specific market, but it's probably not going to work with everyone. But yeah, I mean, just going through as you raised the point. So this is a bottle, for example, of a natural red. Again, this one has a crown cap like a beer. Doesn't have a cork, and it's a transparent glass bottle, which isn't very common in red wines. And yeah, and the label's very simple. It's just a big air. These are Italian wines. We have them on our website. They're on our subscription. And he just says è rosso, è orange, è bianco. He said he has orange in English, not sure why. And è rosato, I think. So yeah, at the same time, it's very cool looking. I think it's very simple. And he says that his idea for this wine, this line of wines, were the wines that his granddad produced, and like didn't really commercialize. He drank them with his friends, and he put them in liter bottles. And yeah, and so the idea is to have very simple packaging. So that's pretty common in natural wine, and you do often see these crown caps because again, natural wine is usually produced to be drunk early. It's not the same, and that's not necessarily true of all natural wine, but most natural wine is made to be drunk young. So you don't need a cork, because a cork is generally only necessary for wines that you're going to age. So you can go crazy. You can use a screw cap. You can use a crown cap. And again, the bottle being transparent. If this was a wine that I was going to put away for 5 years, or 10 years, I probably wouldn't want a transparent bottle, because you can have light damage in the wine. But because I'm probably going to drink it in the next year, or select someone to drink in the next year, it's not really a problem. And I've had less spoiled natural wine than I have spoiled conventional wine, and I've drunk a hell of a lot of both. So that also, yeah, kind of is a case in point in that you don't really need to protect your wine that much unless you're going to be putting it in a cellar for a decade. So yeah, and I mean, yeah, this is the bottle I showed earlier. Maybe that's a kind of more elaborate label. And again, and a lot of people put wax on the top as well, which is again just stylistic. It kind of makes you think of old style wines, but it's kind of just a marketing ploy for natural winemakers. This is our own label, made by a Brazilian winemaker in the south of Brazil, in Pelotas. It's our juicy Merlot. And yeah, we went again with quite a simple label. It's our J for juicy. And this is a sparkling, this is a sparkling red as well. And again, crown cap. And this is actually because it's sparkling. This has a function. It keeps the bubbles in. Which obviously you can use a cork like in champagne or sparkling wine, but this is easier. And all sparkling wine has this cap at some point. They just remove it and then put a cork in afterwards, usually. So yes, so that is, yeah, that's about kind of like presentation of natural wines. But yeah, I am a sucker for a nice label, to be honest. I mean, when you're shopping for a bottle of wine, that a lot of the time that's all you've got to go on, especially if there isn't a sommelier helping you through the selection. So yeah, I mean, it's very fickle, but it's a fact. The label will definitely help you choose a wine. And yeah, so we were halfway through a video anyway, and I will continue. I'll let the guy opens a wine and he has a taste and he kind of shows you what he thinks natural wine kind of looks like and tastes like. And yeah, so I'll play the rest of the video and then we'll have another chat about it.
Let's taste some. This is Cherry Bianco. It's made with 100% Catarrasso grapes, which is a grape most commonly grown in Sicily. And because the wine isn't filtered, you may see some little sediment in the glass or in the bottle, and that's okay. And some bottles are hazy as well. Don't worry, that's okay too. I chose this wine because it's a really great introduction to someone trying natural wine for the first time. The grape and the style is really accessible, lovely freshness, lemoniness, grapefruitiness, but still like quite a lot of body stuff. Now, when trying natural wine, people use the word like funk or funkiness. It usually refers to like a sort of like farmyardy type smell, which sounds kind of awful, but it's because of the low sulfur content. And what sulfur dioxide does, the added sulfur dioxide, it eradicates odor. So you will get funky smells from time to time because it's all natural. And because there's less junk in the wine, people say it doesn't give you a hangover. People say, I mean, it all depends on how much the stuff you drink. But I don't know, it makes sense if it's just grape juice, right? This wine is cracking value. I got it for a tenner, but look around for local natural wine bars. Some of them are still delivering. There's a great app called Razin. Razin's a great app to find local natural wine shops and bars in your area. So scout around and support some small local businesses. That's it for me. If you like this video, maybe let the algorithm know that you liked it. And if you want to see more, I'll be making more food and drink related content on this channel. So.
Okay, cool. There is. I think he was a little bit drunk when he made that video, but that's fine. So he's drinking a natural wine there. He chose a wine that wasn't necessarily that crazy looking. I think he was probably choosing a wine that was an easy wine for someone who's new to natural wine to drink, to kind of understand. But he does touch upon sometimes natural wines can be funky, he says. And a lot of people ask me, what does funky mean? And we used to actually at the bar, when our bar was open, we had one of our customers was Ed Motta, used to come there quite a lot. He's a massive natural wine fan. He loves natural wine, and he used to every now and then he'd sniff the glass and go, "Oh, funky," and it was just fantastic. But so what's funky?
He's a living proof that natural wine can make you drunk.
Yes, yes.
I don't know about the hangover, but that definitely can make you drunk.
I've been drunk with Ed Motta in the bar before on natural wine. He brought a lot of bottles with him sometimes. Anyway, so, and he talked about funky. A lot of people talk about funky with natural wine. This is something that sometimes puts people off natural wine. Is people say, oh, they smell of barnyard and they taste like sheep, and it's kind of a misconception. But we have to accept that yes, with a spontaneous fermentation, with less filtering, less polishing, natural wine will be more complex and will have more flavor profiles going on. Some of them may be similar to conventional wine, like you can have lots of fruit, you can have high acidity in both conventional and natural wine, but also that can lead to a more funky wine. And what people probably are talking about when they say funky is this kind of slight barnyardy, like a kind of animal smell, which again sounds terrible, but it's not really when you put it together with fruit and with acidity, and it just means that you're tasting nature, you're smelling and tasting nature. There is a yeast strain called Brettanomyces. It's a strain of yeast. My dog is called Brett, and it's short for Brettanomyces. And it's not necessarily because I love Brettanomyces. I have to have funky wine all the time, and it's also not because my dog smells. But it's because it's a point of a lot of it's an interesting point for me. It's a very interesting point in natural wine, is that Brettanomyces is a strain of yeast that is very desirable in beer making. People add it to beer. People have inoculated beer with, often inoculate beer with Brettanomyces. And a lot of beer drinkers, when they drink natural wine, if they have a wine that has Brettanomyces present, they're very happy and they go, oh yeah, that's great. This tastes like a sour Belgian beer or something. But it's undesirable in wine. It's a no-no in wine. You can't have it in conventional wine. It's usually, you can get some Cabernet Francs from the Loire sometimes. They may have a little bit of this kind of aroma to them, and they will be accepted as in conventional winemaking. But yeah, in general, Brettanomyces is a big no-no. And just because of that, just because it's so prohibited and it's so such taboo, I like to find it in my wine. I like to talk about it. I like to talk about why it's okay and it's not necessarily a fault. And when you have some funky smell with a load of fruit, with acidity, with a sense of place, with a, you can like taste what grape it was, you can taste where it was made, and there's still but there is some Brettanomyces, there is a bit of a funky smell. I think that's great. I don't have any problem with it, and it makes wine interesting. But yeah, it turns a lot of people off. Just hearing about it, not actually tasting it. They just think, oh, it tastes of barnyard, I don't want to drink it. But when a lot of people taste natural wine, they go, wow, this is, yeah, so much going on. And it's just one of loads and loads of elements that can be present in natural wine. And yeah, and he had a white wine there. It probably wasn't skin contact. He said it did look a bit darker. It was probably might have been slightly oxidized, as like something that the winemaker has let happen, but seemed very, very drinkable. But you get a lot, as I showed earlier, you do get a lot of orange wines in natural wines, but you can get white wines as well. Some people get a bit confused about that. They think that all natural white wine is orange, but it's not. You can have and you can find flavor profiles that are similar to conventional wine in natural wine. I've had customers, I have people that I know that want to drink a natural wine, but they don't want to venture out of their like safe zone. They want a profile of wine similar to what they're already drinking in conventional wine, and you can find that. There are wines that are very light, very correct, very straightforward, very pure natural wines, and that's fine. And there are also very funky ones, and so you have a big range of wines to kind of to play with, a much wider range than you have in conventional wines. And he also mentioned something at the end called, there's an app called Raisin. He pronounces it terribly, but it's Raisin in French, and it's an app that directs you to places that you can buy natural wine. So it is actually a very good app. We've used it before in Ireland, for example. We used it in Galway. We imagined that there was no natural wine about, and we managed to find like the only place in Galway that sold natural wine and have a bottle. But yeah, so yeah, I think that again with his explanation and with the explanation of the Georgian wines, I think it's pretty comprehensive. I think you guys have probably understood more or less what we're talking about when we talk about natural wine. Does anyone have any more questions at this point?
I would like to understand the word that you said, Brettanomyces. How do you spell this?
I will write it in the chat.
Okay.
Hang on, if I can open the chat. Yes. I'll write it in. Right, Brettanomyces.
That's a tough word.
Sorry?
It's a tough word.
It's a tough word. Yeast strains are generally tough words, scientific words. You
named your dog after this yeast.
Brett, yes.
Right.
Did. And because Brett coincidentally is a name, as a common name not in England necessarily, but in Australia and in the States. But we refer to it as Brett generally in natural wine as well. Nobody bothers to say the full word usually, but we can say.
I did
Brett.
not see. Did you write it in the?
I did, but maybe.
Yes, in the chat. No, yeah, you didn't.
No.
It wasn't public. You have to write it again.
Yeah, I'll write it again. No problem.
Everyone in meeting. Yes.
Yeah, Brett on Mises. There we go. Brett.
Now you're right.
Brett for short, with 2 T's, and you get a lot of beer makers name their pets Brett. But so if someone is switched on with their beer, and I say my dog's called Brett, often they say, "Oh, do you make beer? Are you into beer?" And I said, "No, natural wine." And then that starts a whole conversation. And yeah, as I said, it's actually quite easy to bring beer, like really serious beer drinkers, over to natural wine, because there are some flavor profiles in common, and also if they're really into their beer, they usually like naturally fermented beer and stuff, and local, and they're into sort of the artisan process. So yeah, we did have quite a few beer drinkers that came to our bar when we were open. Yeah, and I'd sent a text by Wine Folly over to have a look again at just like pretty much a snapshot of what is natural wine. But I'm probably going to leap over to our website because I noticed it's in Portuguese, our website, but I noticed last night I did a quick translate and asked me if I wanted to translate the page, and I did, and it's an incredibly good translation. There's one word that the algorithm didn't translate properly. It translated vinhateiro into wine dresser. I have no idea why. But if we kind of just skim over that, I just think it's a really nice, comprehensive definition, and it's what I think natural wine is, and it's kind of like a nice conclusion to what I've explained today. So
I think Raquel has a question.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I'd like to know how long a bottle of wine, natural wine, lasts. If you don't put anything to
sulfites, yeah. Especially if you don't put sulfites in, that's a very, very big question, because, and kind of like it's difficult to answer that because logically it would last less than a wine that has had sulfites added. The science says that it will spoil more quickly. But I have had natural wines, 0 sulfite wines before. Like I stock, I think the earliest wine I have, the earliest vintage is 2013, and it's a white wine. White wines are generally more delicate. It is fantastic. I have this, it's a white Lorena from Brazil. It's made by the same guy who makes our juicy Merlot. And it's a wine that's, it's 2013, so it's very old for a natural wine, and it's fantastic. And I mean, it has aged and it has evolved. It's definitely not spoiled. The acidity is perfect. The fruit generally, as wine evolves, the fruit will settle a bit. The fruit will be a bit more subdued. And other things will start to come up, like maybe if it's fruit, it'll be dried fruit, maybe some nuttiness. These things happen often with oxidization, but they're just a natural evolution. And even conventional wine that is aged will also follow that pattern of being less fruity, being more earthy flavors, earthy color over time. So logically, you would say that yes, natural wine lasts less than conventional wine, but in practice, I haven't really found that. I have not, as I said, I've had very, very few spoiled natural wines, and they haven't necessarily been old. And I have had a lot of old natural wines which have been great. I mean, some of the most expensive wine in the world is natural, and we don't know that. Like Domaine de la Conti, for example, they don't have yeasts. They don't fine or filter their wine. They don't manipulate their wine too much in the vineyard, because they're very, very, very traditional, and they're making wine as well the way it's been made for generations and generations, and they haven't upped their production. They don't mass produce. So yeah, Domaine de la Conti, one of the most expensive wines in the world, and conventional wine drinkers usually think of it as the holy grail. That's a natural wine, and they're made to age. There's a producer in Bordeaux called Chateau Le Puy. It's P-U-Y. It's natural Bordeaux. He's been very sort of open about being a natural winemaker for a long time. It's not super expensive, but it's expensive. So like in Brazil, you pay upwards of 300 reals a bottle. But it's not like you get a lot of conventional Bordeaux for thousands of reals a bottle. And he's got a lot of his back vintages in, I can't remember what, I think it's World Wine that imports it. But he has, yeah, here in Brazil, that's traveled all the way to Brazil, been stocked here for years and years. He has 2013s, 14s, 2008s, 2005s they're great, and they are natural.
Susanna just asked if you keep the natural wine in a wine cellar as well. Do you have to?
I think it's wise, yes. If you can, I would keep, and it doesn't have to be a wine cellar. It doesn't necessarily have to be an adega, like I have one here in my office, but it doesn't have to be. Generally, it should be in a cool, dark place. That's where you want to store wine. Always is a cool, dark place. If you don't have an adega, you just find whereabouts in your house is the coolest and the darkest. You don't want loads of humidity either, is not very good. So also not if it's a really damp, dark place, that's not great. But yeah, I wouldn't say you need to keep them in an adega. For example, our stock for the website is not kept in an adega. It's kept in a cool, dark place, and it's fine like that. But yeah, if you keep it in the light, in the heat, you may have problems, especially, as I said, with a wine like this that's in a clear glass casing. You may have problems if you keep it in the light. So just be kind of sensible. And yeah, we as I said, we ship to all of Brazil. So and we've never had problems with. We've had problems with the couriers, but we haven't had problems with the wine itself. It travels well. I've never had someone ever sort of send back a spoiled bottle. So yeah, we're pretty confident usually that the wines are fine. So yeah, I'm gonna just get up our website again. I'm gonna take you over to the page. So here we go, juicy.com. If anybody would like to subscribe, it's here or here. And these are the bottles we sell. There's also and on our shop page, we have a couple of promotions running, but okay, it's a bit slow.
Dominic, which one is the best to start? Because I think it will be a good thing for me, because I always, my body is not accepting anymore the wine with many products, I didn't know about that, but I know that I feel too bad when I drink The next day I have tachycardia. I have many things that I have in the night or at the night in the next day. So I think it would work for me. Maybe you can say for me one good for taste.
Yes. So we, as I said, I've said before that a lot of natural wine. If I didn't tell you it was natural, you may not even notice, because the profile is similar to a conventional wine, but it's been made in a natural way. So, like for example, this air that I showed you earlier, this one's an orange one to the right, so that's obviously different to what people have usually drunk, and also the flavor profile is pretty different. Like, it's not very fruity, it's very almost saline, very dry but very fresh, but the red is actually, it's a very, very easy drinking. I like to chill it, actually. I like to serve it like about 10 degrees or less, not like 15 as some, or 13 as some people would serve red wine. But it's a very easy wine to understand. There's nothing crazy going on there. It's not funky. So this one's a nice entry level natural wine. And also in terms of like whites, this is the white, by the way, that I said, the Lorena, is 2013, and it's still good. I mean, it's amazing, but I wouldn't say it's a very normal wine necessarily. It's similar to a conventional aged wine, but not many people drink aged whites, so it's not necessarily the most normal wine for a lot of people. This one, this German, actually, Andy Weigand, this is incredible, really, really good white wine. And again, it would please most conventional wine drinkers. He ferments in old oak barrels because it's the way his family have been doing it for generations. But with natural wine, you very, very rarely get people aging or fermenting in new oak. So it's nice, subtle oak. You may not even notice it's there, but it just makes the wine really, really elegant and well-rounded. So that's a really nice bottle. In terms of, let me go back to the initial page, because I can go along the, I mean, what do you usually drink, white or red, by the way? I don't know, or do you not mind?
Red.
Do you like red? Okay. Well, yeah, as I said, this air is a nice entry point. Our Merlot is delicious. I would not necessarily say it would be that normal to a conventional wine drinker. So maybe it might not be the first wine that you should try, but maybe the second or the third. This Hydro also is very nice. This is Brazilian, and it's a blend of Pinot Noir and Cabernet Franc. It's very light, and so you can chill it. I wouldn't say it's very similar to a lot of conventional wine, but it's a nice sort of chillable light red. I like it a lot. And this Italian as well, 9 is enough. Rosso is also very nice. It's Cabernet Franc as well. But well, I think I said the most, I think the easiest entry level wine is this Air Rosso, and you have a liter of it if you buy this bottle. So it goes a long way, can be shared with friends. But yeah, I would generally go with, if you are being advised by anybody, I would go for a lighter, fruitier natural wine, because when natural wines, and most of them are lighter and fruitier, but some wines, for example, this Cabernet Sauvignon, Penzo Cabernet Sauvignon. Cabernet Sauvignon is a very, very robust grape. So when you make a wine with Cabernet Sauvignon, it's never going to be light unless it's very, very low extraction. So this, for example, this is a wine that's incredibly intense, full-bodied, and yeah, I would not necessarily recommend it to an initial drinker or someone who doesn't like really heavy reds. But the Bonardo as well is very good. But yeah, I would say the Air is a nice, safe bet. But Italian, sorry, I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. Italian natural wines are actually usually a pretty safe bet, because the reds especially are often, not a million miles away from flavor profiles in conventional wine. They're usually quite light, quite structured, but just not heavy and not really not too funky. So yeah, and sorry, actually, I am going to share again, because I'm just going to take you over to here. This is just our kind of like, and we're going to translate the page. Hang on. How did I translate it last time? Just trying to figure out how to translate it.
Never mind, that's not a problem. I think you can, we can do it ourselves.
But it's for basically whoever comes to our website and doesn't really know what we're talking about, I direct them to this page. And as we've seen from all the videos, from all talking about natural wine, there isn't a very clear definition about what natural wine is. You generally have to talk to someone who works with natural wine, or a producer, and a few people, because people have differing opinions. But we believe in the following. We think that when you make wine, you need healthy grapes. This usually means organic or biodynamic. Organic and biodynamic certification, as I've said, is really difficult, especially here in Brazil. Organic grapes here are few and far between. So a lot of people here, natural producers, they work with grapes that are not certified organic, and I have to be transparent about that. I have to be clear about that. We have to trust that they're buying grapes from small producers. They're buying grapes that are sustainable, but they're not necessarily organically certified. But with healthy grapes, you can ferment spontaneously. So the presence of bacteria, healthy bacteria, yeasts on the skins of the grapes kind of gives you an indication as well of how healthy that vineyard is and how it is treated organically and not treated with pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers. And the winemaker, he has some decisions to make. Obviously, wine doesn't necessarily make itself, but I like to think of the winemaker. I don't really like to think of him as a winemaker. I don't really like that word, maker, because he doesn't really make the wine. He just supervises the wine. I like to think of the winemaker as a wine supervisor. He's there to help the wine along. He's there to possibly change the vessel, or change where the wine's fermenting, or add some more grape must, or add some naturally obtained yeasts, like Pied de Cuvée, for example, Pied de Cuba. There's no real name for it in English, but this term is when you stomp grapes before harvest. Just before harvest, you'll take a few of the most ripe grapes at the time, and you'll stomp them, and you'll create this. It's kind of like in natural fermenting bread. When you use levain, you use a starter, a sourdough starter. You obtain this starter, you obtain this levain, or you obtain this yeast. And a lot of winemakers will do that as insurance, perhaps. So when you start vinifying, when you've collected all your grapes, you put them in the recipient and you want them to ferment, especially if you're making a white wine with no skins. It may be harder to ferment. It may take a long time to ferment. It may be a very slow ferment. It may not ferment. So if you want to give it a helping hand, you can add some of this Pied de Cuvée, and that is naturally obtained. You've stomped the grapes yourself. You've picked them from the same vintage. And so that intervention, for example, is a very natural one. It's not necessary in most cases, But yeah, just exemplifying that the winemaker is just there to supervise the wine. He's not there to make the wine. He's not there to obtain a certain result. The result will be depending on the vintage, will be depending on the grapes, the temperature, the climate of not just in the vineyard, but in the winery. And the result will be a natural result. So natural, spontaneous fermentation, not messing around during the vinification. And then what you obtain is a natural wine. And it's just grape juice, it's fermented grape juice. It can tell you about where it's from. It can tell you about the vintage because it is nature talking in the bottle. And just to summarize again, natural wine is the way wine has been made for millennia. Conventional winemaking, as it's known, is just kind of a blip in the history of wine. Natural wine is just real wine. It's just the way people have been making wine for thousands of years, and recently it's been a homogenized product due to market pressures. But we are kind of steering ourselves back towards what wine has always been, which is also, it's kind of a tendency in general, as I said, in food, even in clothes, in consumption. People are trying to be more conscious consumers, I think, that's why natural wine, even though it's not the most known about subject, it's not the most talked about subject, but it is on the increase. It's always increasing. It's always getting more and more people on board, and I think it's because of that. We're interested in conscious consumption and having something real, having a real experience. And yeah, so that's natural wine to me. It's a shame we can't drink any. Well, I can't, but
you can. Now Susanna can as well. She's been guided.
You can drink, and you can have.
I can't. I will wait when I stop my antibiotics.
Antibiotics, yes, and so yes. You can smell, so you can have your smell back.
Yes, but yeah, it's something that I think it's something to go away with and think about, and do your own homework. Have a look at our website, have a look at other websites, have a look around Rio. There are places that sell natural wine. As I said, a lot of very expensive restaurants have natural wine, but luckily you don't have to go to expensive restaurants anymore to drink natural wine. There are a few places, like an example, the Slow Bakery in Rio has natural wines. They do not have anybody there that knows anything about natural wines to sell them to you. So you kind of have to go on your own and kind of
remind us again the name of your bar here in Rio. What's the name?
So our bar is Winehouse.
Winehouse.
It's the Instagram is Winehouse_Rio. Okay. And we're open Tuesdays to Saturdays, PM. We're open in the evenings. We don't open.
Not today, Susanna. Not today, Raquel. You cannot go to the Winehouse.
We stock natural wines there, and we do often have at least one natural wine by the glass. So it's a good place to low risk to try a couple of natural wines, and the people there can kind of steer you towards something you should like. Mm-hmm. And then and we have a few of our bottles, even the juicy bottles we have on the wine list there. And as I said, and if it's something you fancy just having regularly, then we have our subscription, and it's I'm personally take care of the subscription. I generally put one Brazilian bottle. If it's I divide the case in half. If it's a case of two, I'll have one Brazilian bottle and one imported bottle. Generally, sometimes not, but I like to focus as well on Brazilian producers, not just imported, because we do have natural producers here.
That's nice. So I'd like to thank Dominic for being with us this morning, enlightening us about natural wine, perhaps not only a healthier, but also a tastier experience of wine drinking. So thanks, Dominic, Susanna, Raquel. Bye-bye. You all have a nice day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I love it. It was very good for me. Thank you.
Now your friends now the rest of the gang, the rest of the class will watch the recording, and hopefully they will like as well. So bye-bye to you all. Thanks for being with us today, Dominic. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.